Hello everybody! Chris Gregory here from Creation for Creation. I'm so glad you're with me. Today I just want to do something a little bit different for our third post in 2018. First of all, thank you for sticking with it. The website, 2017, our first year was great, putting out some content every week. Here we are in 2018, we've switched to once a month, and I'm so glad you have stuck with me. We are on our third month. It's hard to believe it's already March in 2018. And I just had an idea of, since 2018 is the year about creatives, what better idea than to study some great creatives in history and just do short little videos just about how they work, things I've been able to find about them. So I've just been doing a ton of research about creatives through history, and I landed on a guy, Victor Hugo. Of course, pretty famous, just from all of his writing, but no, I would say he is a very interesting individual. The way he just went about his life and the way he worked, I was naturally drawn to things I was reading about him, and I know a weird guy when I see one or read about one, and I'm getting that vibe from Victor Hugo. So journey with me as we learn about him and just learn about how he worked and his routine. First of all, Victor Hugo, those of you that do not know, is a French writer, a romantic poet. He was born in 1802 and died in 1885, so right there in that 19th century. His most notable works are Les Mis, of course, and The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Two smash hits, really. Like, what an amazing claim that you can say I wrote Les Mis and The Hunchback of Notre Dame. But of course, in trying to find out how Victor Hugo worked, I had to go through a little bit of his life, and I found out, his father was a military officer under Napoleon and was even one of his generals, and they naturally traveled around a lot because of that. And I think that as well where some of Victor's sort of rebel side came from when it came to politics, and what sort of pushed him into that as he was going through his life. It would later flesh out in many ways. Hugo first studied law, actually, which is interesting. Many of us creatives end up doing something different than what we studied officially. He never actually practiced law, though he became a writer. I think that was with his mother's push. She said, "Victor, I think you should become a writer." And so he published his first novel in 1823, and it was off from there. Being an early pioneer in France for this republic mindset, of course, was counter to what Napoleon was trying to do. So it got him in some political heat, and he was actually forced into exile, really, and he spent a lot of time on some islands in the English Channel, most notably an island called Guernsey. Pretty sure I'm saying that right, but that's where he really lived for an extended period of time and wrote some more of his works. Like I said, so far this year we've been talking a lot about creatives, and like I said, this video is literally just to try and do a creative way of telling you about some great creatives in the past of, what were they like? How did they work? So I really studied and read a lot online just about how Hugo worked, and I found just a lot of stuff about his daily routine. He was a well-documented guy. Apparently he invited all sorts of guests to his house and writers of all sorts to come and write about him or just study him, and he was very open in that way. Would think it's important to note that this guy was pretty famous in the 19th century. It's hard to really get widespread acclaim throughout the world, but this guy did it. He was a very, very famous person in France, and very, very notable. Hugo was an interesting guy. He is a man for the books. One thing I found, he had a lot of mistresses, which we do not condone here. Biographers alike have sort of given up on documenting them all. There's so many. And he had a lot of weird habits as well. He slept on a hard bed. I guess that way he couldn't ever get too comfortable. In the morning comes, he was ready to get up. Anyway, he rose early. Everything I've ever read about him says he was starting way in the AM and just starting his day. His diet was a lot of root vegetables and meat in moderation. and he drank pure water. An interesting thing he would do every morning, the first thing, he would just take an ice cold bath or sponge bath and then immediately towel off with a rough towel. Then he would go swimming in the sea. It's interesting that his life of creativity and poetry seems so free in how he wrote, but his life was so much the opposite of that. Not necessarily in his personality, I can't get that, but his routine was one that was very rigid, or very staunch, and it was almost the same every day. Every day, his mistress's servant would bring him a freshly brewed pot of coffee to get that caffeine, and a letter to him from his mistress. And that's how he would start each morning. He would read that letter, drink that coffee, and then he would just pound 2 raw eggs, and then he would just start working, start writing until 11 a.m. And at that point, at 11 a.m., he stepped into a bath that was apparently kept outside overnight, and he would sit in that, and then he would join his guest at 12 for lunch. He took consideration into what he ate, of course, like I said. One biographer said he ate like a prized fighter. Next thing he would do in his day is after he ate lunch, at 12, he would immediately rush out the door and start exercising. He would either walk for 2 hours, or he would do such an intense, rigorous workout until he started profusely sweating. But apparently someone had to go with him to make sure he was okay, because apparently he almost died once. It was such an intense physical workout that someone was there to make sure he didn't collapse and die. Again, what else to do after a sweaty day but jump into the sea once again? And he would get out and let the sun just sort of dry him off. That was his midday. He knew how to take a break. A few of his other daily tendencies, he did these things every day, is he went to the barber every single day. After the barber was done with his hair, Hugo would collect it and take it with him. No one knows what he would do with the hair, but he just scooped his hair up off the ground and took it with him. He would go back to his house. He would work just to fill these 3 manuscript trunks. He was always writing. He was always receiving mail. His mistress, Juliet, would actually help him write back, and she was apparently pretty good at forging his signature and using his imagination. One thing I loved that I read, though, is that Hugo was always carrying a notepad. From what I read, he would say something and then turn away from the crowd and just pull out this notepad and write it down. Everything ended up in print for him. It was just a way for him to catalog his thoughts, what he was thinking. I can't speak too much into that. Not going to foresay what he was actually writing down, but what a way to track your day and track what you think, track what you say. What's amazing to me about this routine of Victor Hugo, a great writer, like I said, Les Mis and Hunchback of Notre Dame and other works, of course, is he was disciplined and he did it every day. He wasn't waiting around for someone to get him up and get his day started for him. He was a self-starter in that way, and that led him to become famous. And eventually he would go back to France after his exile, and he was buried in honor. To this day, he's highly regarded as one of the top French writers, not just of his time, but of all time. So discipline for him was a key to his success and a key to his writing. Another thing I don't believe I mentioned is he would draw inspiration from everywhere. Like I say, he was taking a notepad with him everywhere he went, but he was going to these parts of town that normal gentlemen wouldn't be seen in to gain inspiration from there, these dark alleyways or something. Things that today in the modern time, we can just hop online and Google something or see something on television that gives the insight to the darker side of life. But no, as a poet, Hugo was going into these places himself because that was the only way he could obtain it. He was a hard worker. He was always chasing after that inspiration. He wasn't going to limit himself to just what he knew. He was always trying to expand his mind, expand what he could write about. And I think it shows in the vast array of his writings. Hunchback of Notre Dame, of course, is totally different from Les Mis, and it has those political undertones the whole way through. And just what a way to reach his culture and make an impact is through his writing and through how he gained inspiration. If I learned one thing from Hugo's story, is that consistency is definitely a key to excellence, but also rising early it's something I struggle with. I'm not an early person, and all of these people, Maya Angelou included, all these writers, all of these great thinkers, woke up super early and started writing, or they were up in the AM times, but they also knew how to take a break. Hugo would take a 2-hour walk or exercise. He knew how to balance his time, and he knew how to refresh himself in order to put out that excellent work. He was always writing and pouring himself out, but he knew how to recharge himself, whether that was through his guest, or through his mistress, or just through his time working out. That's one thing I could pull from Hugo's life. I don't want to miss the fact that Hugo took care of his body, or took care of what he ate. I think that's going to be a growing trend with people that are younger, and like myself, millennial, and the generation behind me. They're going to be more cognizant of what we put into our bodies, because that helps us with what comes out. Well, guys, like I said, I wanted to keep this sort of short, and just maybe we just do these a couple times this year, just where I just bring some information about a person in history that I find fascinating, that is a creative, who is a great, like Victor Hugo, and share what I found about his life and his routine, and share that with you all. I hope this is enjoyable, and I hope you come back for next month's post. We've got some things working. I'm excited, and hope you stay with me. So this is Chris Gregory signing off for Creation for Creation. Thanks. Guernsey. That's not right. Guernsey? That can't be right. Doggone it.